GoForThe2.com in with our Week 5 predictions for the college football season. I'll be the first to admit it. Week number 4 was atrocious. We're going to turn our attention to a positive week. We're going to exercise the negativity and turn our attention to a great week of college football this coming weekend. We'll start in the Big Ten. Iowa and Northwestern. Northwestern coming off a 24-13 home loss to the Nebraska Cornhuskers. In that loss, that defense allowed 310 rushing yards to Nebraska in that battle. They now have to go on the road where Iowa has not looked good in recent weeks. 2 weeks ago at home, they faced North Dakota State and lost that battle on a last-second field goal. They had the hangover effect last week in New Jersey. They picked up a lackluster 14-7 victory over Rutgers, but it was a conference game. They now come back home and have to face another conference opponent in Northwestern. Traditionally, these games are very close outside of last year. However, I like the offensive line play of Iowa entering this battle. They're only rushing for 159 yards on the ground, but I look at Northwestern's defensive front seven. I think they're worn out, and I give the advantage to quarterback C.J. Beathard and Iowa's offense. Look at Iowa's defense overall, led by safety and corner Desmond King. I think they can force Northwestern's offense to methodically work down the field, and I think Iowa breaks out for a convincing home victory over Northwestern this weekend. I think it's 45-21. Iowa picks up a convincing home win over Northwestern and moves to 2-0 in the Big Ten. Another intriguing ACC battle is Miami and Georgia Tech. 2 weeks ago, Georgia Tech had a lackluster performance against top-ranked Clemson, lost that battle 26-7. You look at the rushing offense of Georgia Tech overall, only averaging 216 rushing yards per game. Under Paul Johnson in recent years, they've been well over 250 and close to 300, but I think that number's a little bit skewed due to the competition that they faced in the early part of the season. You look at Boston College week number 1. Last year, Boston College had a top 5 rushing defense, only allowing 83 rushing yards per game. They won that battle 17-14. They also played Clemson, that's only allowing 92 rushing yards on the ground entering week number 6. So keep that in mind. They face a Miami Hurricane team that's 3-0, coming off a convincing road victory over Appalachian State 2 weeks ago. They now have, coming out of a bye, and have on deck the following week, October 8th, Florida State. That's an intriguing battle. Is Miami looking ahead? But here's the thing I look at when I look at Miami. They lost defensive end Quan Muhammad prior to the season starting. They need their defensive ends to play very disciplined when you're going up against the triple option. I think that this is where the Hurricanes defense misses Quan Muhammad. Entering this battle, they're playing very well, only allowing 62 rushing yards per game, but they're coming out of a bye, and when you face a triple option, it's a lot different in game speed than it is in practice, and Paul Johnson's job is on the line. They've had an extra 3 days to add some new wrinkles. Even though Miami's coming out of a bye week, that could be a negative factor in terms of rust entering this battle with Georgia Tech. This is not an easy place to play in Atlanta. I expect Georgia Tech to get the upset victory early, 12 o'clock Saturday, 27-23 over the Hurricanes. I think they catch the Hurricanes in a trap situation. Miami's looking ahead to Florida State, and Paul Johnson and Justin Thomas pull off the upset with a upset victory, 27-23 over Miami. Another intriguing battle in the Big 12 is West Virginia and Kansas State. Kansas State, since 2011, has owned the series over West Virginia, 4-0, and has won those ball games by 17 points per game. You look at the last 2 years, though. Last 2 years have been very close. 1 point last year, Kansas State won in Manhattan 24-23. 2 years ago in Morgantown, they picked up a 26-20 victory over the Mountaineers. But I look at West Virginia, and I think they're one of the surprise teams in the Big 12. I picked them to finish 3rd prior to the season starting. I'm not backing away, and I think they have the speed advantage over Kansas State in this battle. West Virginia's offense is rushing for 200 yards per game, and they face now in their first 4 weeks 2 very physical offense and defensive lines in Missouri and BYU and picked up victories. I think they can wear down Kansas State, and I do think they have the speed advantage. I think they jump up early and put the pressure on Kansas State to match them score for score. And in the end, West Virginia picks up a convincing 17-point home victory over Kansas State in this battle. It might be close early, but in the second half, West Virginia pulls away for a convincing victory over the Wildcats this coming Saturday. We'll keep our attention in the ACC, the marquee battle, Louisville and Clemson. In Death Valley, it's an 8 p.m. start. Everybody's talking Lamar Jackson for the Heisman, and rightfully so. You look at this offense overall, they're averaging 63 points per game. They're rushing for right around 318 yards per game, passing for 363 yards per game. It's a very high, explosive, high-powered offense for the Cardinals and head coach Bobby Petrino. Last two games have been decided by a total of 9 points. Clemson's picked up both of those victories. 2 years ago, they won in Death Valley 23-17. Last year on the road, on a Thursday night, they jumped out to a 14-point lead and held on to win that ball game 20-17. They now come back home to face Heisman Trophy frontrunner Lamar Jackson. But I like Clemson's defense overall. A lot of people have said Clemson's defense is not as good as it was last year. I disagree. Last year, Clemson allowed 21 points per game. Entering this battle, they're only allowing 11 points per game to opposing offenses. Last year, they allowed 125 rushing yards on the ground and 186 passing yards to opposing quarterbacks. Entering this battle against Louisville, they're only allowing 92 rushing yards per game, and they're only giving up 125 passing yards per game. And more importantly, they're holding opposing quarterbacks to 47% completion percentage. That's a big statistic. I think they can keep Lamar Jackson in the pocket, and I think they force him to make his reads and progressions. And I like Clemson's defense matching up against the Cardinals' offense in this battle. I like Deshaun Watson. They're passing for 295 yards per game. They're an explosive offense. The rushing attack needs to get going. They're only averaging 159 yards on the ground, but I think they get healthy in this battle against Louisville. They can run them sideline to sideline, look for Ray McCloud to get involved. I think it's a close game early. But in the end, Clemson picks up a 13-point victory at home in Death Valley. Also think that Dabo Swinney has the coaching advantage over Bobby Petrino in this matchup. 4 straight years now, Dabo Swinney's knocked off LSU, Ohio State, and Oklahoma in back-to-back years. He's a big-game head coach and has his teams ready each and every week. I like Clemson in this matchup to pick up a 13-point victory over Louisville this coming weekend. Another intriguing battle is Florida and Vanderbilt. Florida let that first half lead slip away in Knoxville. They were winning that ball game 21-3 to Tennessee. They were cheering. They thought they had that victory. Josh Dobbs and the crew pulled off a second half comeback to win that matchup 38-28. They now have to go on the road to Nashville to play a team that plays them traditionally very tough over the years in Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt got a gutty overtime victory over Western Kentucky. They're at 2-2 on the year. They're fighting for a bowl berth, and Derek Mason's job is on the line. They have a solid running back in Ralph Webb, and Kyle Shermer's coming on in the system. I think Vanderbilt can keep this game very, very close. In the end, though, Florida escapes with a 17-14 victory over Vanderbilt. But Vanderbilt is in this game from start to finish. Look for the emotional letdown by the Gators as they go on the road. It is a conference game. Vanderbilt will look to start fast and dictate the tempo, jump up early and rely on their defense, especially with Austin Appleby making his second career start. So keep that in mind. I like Vanderbilt at home to keep this game very, very close against Florida. Another intriguing battle. It's an intriguing battle. Penn State and Minnesota. Penn State has not looked good over the last couple of weeks. You look at what they did last week in the Big House. They lost that battle 49-10 and got worn out by a big physical offense and defensive lines in the Michigan Wolverines. 2 weeks ago, they picked up a lackluster victory over Temple. Did not look good in that battle. And 3 weeks ago, they lost a road game to ACC and in-state rival Pittsburgh 42-39. Really don't like the way this team is playing. They now have a conference game. They're at home, and they play Minnesota. Last week on the radio, I said that Colorado State would play Minnesota very, very tough. I'm not big on Minnesota as a whole, but I like the way they play. I think they could pick up the victory on the road in Happy Valley. Also think that they have the quarterback advantage in Mitch Leidner over Trace McSorley. I'm just not sold on the way Penn State's playing. Didn't like the way they played against Kent State. I didn't like the way they played against Pittsburgh. And I certainly didn't like the way they played defensively against Michigan. I think they lose this game. I think it's a high-scoring game, though. I think it's a 34-24 victory by the Minnesota Golden Gophers. I think to me, they're just a team that is bought in. Even though they picked up the lackluster victory over Colorado State, I still like Minnesota at home, on the road in this battle against Penn State. Not sold on James Franklin and what he's doing on the defensive side of the ball entering this battle. Another intriguing battle, Oklahoma and TCU. Big game. Bob Stoops lost another one when they faced Ohio State. Everybody's expecting Oklahoma to just rebound, and this has got to be the game that they pick up. This defense is not playing well, and in terms of big game head coaches, Gary Patterson always has his teams ready. They lost this game in overtime, actually 30-29. He went for 2 points instead of deciding to go for overtime. I like TCU in this matchup. I like the way their offensive line is playing, and I like Kenny Hill in the system over Baker Mayfield. Not sold on what they're doing in terms of Lincoln Riley and that offensive play calling overall for Oklahoma, coupled with the fact of Oklahoma's offensive line has major issues. I like Gary Patterson at home in Fort Worth. I know they're going up against a prolific offense, but to me, I think this team is emotionally done in Oklahoma, and TCU picks up the Big 12 victory this coming weekend. I think they start fast and put the pressure on, and in the end, TCU picks up a convincing 17-point victory over Baker Mayfield and the Oklahoma Sooners. Stay with me all season long. I'll be breaking down the other games, the marquee battles, Tennessee and Georgia. We'll also talk about LSU, Missouri. We'll also talk about Michigan and Wisconsin on the radio show. Follow us at Fantasy Sports Radio. You can fantasyfntsy.com/radio, 10 to 12 p.m. Eastern Time this coming Saturday. Stay with me all season. College football is the best. Have a great week, everyone.